Just as their tradition demands, the brides-to-be, alongside other maidens from same kindred, would cover their faces with clothes and allow the groom to make his choice. At this point, whosoever he chooses, he must marry. On the day of their wedding, when the prince was called to choose his bride among the blindfolded maidens, he chose one of the maidens. When he uncovered her, it was Ugoma he picked. The world turned into misery for the prince. Words was not enough to describe how badly he felt, seeing that he has been tricked to picking his worst enemy. The most painful part was that no one had ever made this costly mistake since time immemorial. Why of all people would the prince make this kind of mistake, picking the wrong bride, and of all people, he picked Ugoma? Iluoma lost her mother when she was 2. 2 years later, her father had a second wife who later gave birth to a female child, Ugoma. At first, life was like heaven to Iluoma, but after the birth of her step-sibling Ugoma, she became a slave in her father's house. This was because few days after the birth of Ugoma, her father died, and this made her stepmother to change attitude towards her. She started treating her like a slave. At her age of 6, she had started doing hard jobs. She does the laundry, she fetches firewood and water alone. She would go to a far distant stream that is in the bush and fetch water alone, regardless of her age. She carries heavy load. While other students goes to school, Iluoma stays at home to take care of her sister Ugoma. As a child, she never saw any of this as wickedness or punishment. She believed that it was something she needed to do as the most elderly in the house. As she used to tell people who asked her reason for not going to school, that she would resume school together with her sibling once she comes of age. She believed this her thoughts till one day, Egodi, her stepmother, instructed her to take her daughter to school and return as quickly as possible to do the house chores and go to the farm as well. Iluoma was so happy. It seemed she didn't understand the message, so she quickly rushed inside, dressed up in her beautiful uniform, and was ready to go to school with her kid sister, Ugoma. But her stepmother ordered her to go back and remove her school uniform. She said, "Do I look like your mother to send you to school? Why should I send you to school? Education is for kids who has mommy, not for orphan like you. You don't have a mother, neither do you have a father. Why should I waste my money on you? Take my child to school now and meet me in the farm in minutes. Else, you will starve for 7 days." Iluoma remembered the experience she once had, the time she starved her for 3 days, just for not fetching water for the day. The fear of being starved again made her took Ugoma to school and did as her stepmother has instructed. The next day, after getting Ugoma ready for school, she pleaded with Egodi to send her back to school, even if it would be just 3 times in a week. But she refused. Iluoma cried every day, seeing other children in their uniform going to school, while she is either going to the market or to the farm. She prayed God could provide a helper, but no one seemed to care. She cried the most whenever she remembered how she used to be the best in her class when her father was still alive. One day, while Iluoma was in the bush fetching firewood, she saw a little boy in the bush wearing a school uniform. It happened that the little boy ran away from home because he does not want to go to school. He said he hates education and wanted to be a hunter, but her parents would not allow him. Iluoma looked at him in a great tenderness and nodded in disagreement to what he said. She said, "Look at me. Do I look happy? I cry every day seeing other children go to school. Why all I do is go to farm, market, fetch firewood or water. At the end, if I fail to do any of this in a day, I would starve for the next day. The most painful part is that even though I am not a student, I visit school every day because I have to take my stepsister to school. And each time I see other children in their various classes learning, I envy them because they have parents and they are going to school too. But look at you, provided with these beautiful opportunities, and you want to throw it away because you wanted to be a hunter. Do you know you can be a hunter and a good student at the same time? All you need to do is whenever you come back from school, you go to hunt. That way, both you and your parents would be happy." The little boy was amazed by her advice, but he pointed out that studying was difficult because he don't understand anything. Iluoma offered to be helping him with some difficult topics. The little boy took her advice, thanked her and ran to school immediately. The next day, the little boy went hunting after school and met Iluoma in the bush. He begged her to help explain some difficult topics to him, which she did. He asked her how she knew the topic, and she revealed that she used to hide by the corner and learn from some classes each time she took her sister to school, and also in the afternoon she goes early enough so she could listen to some classes before dismissal. The little boy was happy. He offered to help her go back to school. He said he would talk to his parents to help her, but Iluoma stopped him. She said, "No need. Even the king had took me back to school after seeing me on the way to the farm while others are in school. He paid my school fees and got me new school uniform. But my stepmother burnt them and lied against me before the king. She said I burnt them myself. She even bribed the teachers to testify against me, and they all said I hated education, that I used to run away from school to go to farm because I prefer farming. I had no one to speak for me, so the king asked them to send me out of the school to avoid troubles. Even the king's most trusted teacher lied against me. I later found out that even the school headmistress wanted me off the school because her daughter was in my class and I does better than her. She was afraid I would win her daughter in the national maths competition, and whoever wins the competition would be sent abroad to study. But right now, everybody sees me as a truant. No school would even agree to accept me. Just leave it. I've already accepted my fate." The boy felt bad for her. He promised to help her one day. The little boy kept on meeting her each time he encountered any difficulty in his studies. At times, he brought snacks and some food to her. One day, Iluoma convinced him to take part in the maths competition. She promised to put him through the required calculations that would help him pass or even win the competition at national level. The boy agreed, and she taught him as promised. As it was known across most people in their school, the only person that once challenged Amaka, the school headmistress' daughter, in a maths competition and won was Ugoma. Since she is no longer a student, definitely the winner of this year's competition must be Amaka. This was people's thoughts. Her mother, the headmistress, was so happy She told everyone to prepare a very beautiful congratulatory gift for her beautiful daughter because she must emerge the winner of the competition. She bought all that her daughter would be needing to travel out before the competition. Normally, before they go for the national maths competition, they usually host intra-school competition, after which the top 4 students would represent their school at the state level. Then the top 2 students would go to national. During the intra-school competition, Obidike, the little boy Iluoma helped, came third. That was surprising to everyone, including his parents. They least expected him to come 10th, talk more of being among the top 3. At the state level, he came second, while Amaka came first. This sent more shock to the headmistress and everyone in their school. The headmistress called him to her office and said, "Even though your grades has improved to some extent, you can never be a competition to my daughter because she will still beat you at national level." She didn't see him as a threat to her daughter, so she overlooked him. After saying this, Obidike said to himself, "If only this woman knew I just followed Iluoma's instruction and failed some of the questions intentionally, she would be more worried. Well, no matter what, you cannot do anything to me because I am the heir to the throne of Amefo." He left the office smiling at himself. During the national maths competition, Obidike came first. He got the scholarship to study abroad. When their school headmistress heard this, she was so angry. She never expected someone like Obidike could score 100% in a maths competition. Someone who knew nothing before. Since she was the one that took them to the competition center, she decided to abandon Obidike there and go home with her daughter alone. Little did she knew that Obidike was the heir apparent to the throne of Amefo, the real prince, but he preferred to live with his maternal grandmother, who allows him to do his hunting after school, because his parents would never allow him to do such. As she was about to drive out with her daughter alone, the king arrived happily to pick his son. He had promised to take him back home by plane if he win the math competition. The headmistress do not know what to say again after seeing how the little boy he despised was honored by the king. She went back home shamefully. On getting home, Obidike ran directly to the bush to meet Iluoma. He took his gold medal and gave it to Iluoma. He told her that she was the one who won the competition. He said, "Don't worry, I made a fake type of this medal, which I will keep in our house for my parents' sake. But you have the original one. Keep it safe. We might not see again till I come back after my studies, because I will be traveling to Lagos tomorrow, and from there, I will be going to abroad to complete my studies. I will be happy if you wait for me till I return." The next day, when Obidike was traveling, he stopped by the bush to see Iluoma. He gave her some money, but she questioned where he got the money from. Then he said, "I knew you don't know who I really am, because you chose to call me lost but found, which I allowed you because you really found me. My real name is Prince Obidike, and I am the only son to King Dika from the neighboring village Amefo." Iluoma was surprised. Then his parents called out to him and they left. Years later, Obidike returned from abroad, rich and very handsome young man. He noticed that a lot has changed. He barely recognized some of his classmates back then in primary school. Iluoma, on the other hand, has grown to a very beautiful young lady. Even though she still suffered under her stepmother, she was still pretty. Rumor had it that all the suitors that had came for her hand in marriage were all deceived by her stepmother, and they abandoned her. The first thing Obidike did when he came back was to look for Iluoma. He went to their usual meeting spot, but the whole place was cleared. So, he went to their house the next day. On getting there, eager to meet her and to avoid mistaking another person for Iluoma, since everyone he knew back then has changed greatly, he started shouting her name from the entrance of their house, hoping she would hear him and come to him. Unluckily for him, Ugoma and her mother were outside. They saw him first and recognized him. They wondered why the prince would be looking for a dirty girl like Iluoma. Iluoma heard the call and answered from the kitchen. But on getting outside, she saw her sister Ugoma hugging a very handsome guy. The person seemed familiar to her, but she's not really sure he was the one. When she asked for the person that called her, her stepmother told her no one and asked her to go back to the kitchen. While she was cooking, she overheard her sister and the mother talking about the gifts the prince brought for her. Ugoma was so happy. She told her mother that the prince took her to the palace and gave her a lot of things. She said he even promised to take her out the next day. Iluoma wondered if it was the same Obidike she helped or another person. Later, she asked Ugoma if the young man that visited their house earlier was Obidike, which she admitted. She said, "I know you are wondering why. Well, the prince came looking for you, but when he saw me and saw how dirty you looked from the kitchen, he chose me." This pained Iluoma so badly that she went away and cried. The next day, the prince came to their house as promised. He spent some time with Ugoma. Iluoma noticed he addresses Ugoma as Iluoma. She wondered if he mistook her sister for her. The prince saw her doing all the work in the house and wondered if the person he is with was really Iluoma. How can the person who used to be a maid be treated like a princess while the princess turned to a slave? He equally noticed that the presumed former princess, he wondered why she hated him this much, even when they had no issue before. The most surprising part was the special treatment her stepmother gave him. He suspected something was not normal. To clear his doubts, he asked the presumed Iluoma about her studies, which she gladly said she just graduated 3 years ago. "Did your stepmother later change her mind?" Obidike asked. Then she came back to her senses and said, "Yes. Why else will I be graduating from primary school just 3 years ago?" The prince felt pity for her. He promised to train her in school if she is willing to go back to school. After spending some time with them, he went back home. One day, while the prince and Ugoma were strolling round the village, some group of girls came and addressed his girlfriend as Ugoma. He wondered why, but Ugoma said they used to mistook her as her sister Ugoma. How? But you both do not look alike. But she covered it up, saying that Ugoma, my stepsister, is too domineering, that people even forgot someone like me exists. It seems she always had a backup answer to every of the prince's questions, which makes him more confused. One day, the prince met Iluoma alone in the stream. He offered to help her lift her pot, which she agreed, but after he helped her, She emptied her pot of water on him. It was clear she did it intentionally. But when the prince wanted to retaliate, she asked, "How does it feel to pay good with evil?" "Lost but found," she said and left. "What did you just call me?" he asked her. But before he could realize it, she was already gone. Something is not normal. I don't know why I feel connected to this girl. And the name she called me, only Iluoma had addressed me by such name. He said to himself, "Are you sure the woman I am with is the same poor girl that helped me years back? I must find out the truth." The next day, he called the presumed Iluoma and asked her to remind him of that name she used to call him back then. But she pretended to have forgotten because it has been long. How can she forget the name so easily when she never knew my real name till the day I traveled? How can her sister know the name, or was it a coincidence? The whole incident with the girl he met at the stream kept on replaying in his head. Ugoma returned that day and told her mother to marry off her sister before she ruins her chances of being with the prince. This made Egodi to arrange an instant marriage for Iluoma with an old man that should be her father's age. On the day of the traditional marriage, Iluoma ran away from the house because she didn't want to get married to an old man. This act from Egodi made the prince have more doubts that the young lady was her biological daughter. Why would she marry off her own daughter like that and support the one that she never liked to be with me? This was when he determined to find the presumed Ugoma and dig out the real truth. He went into the bush in search of the missing bride. There, he found her crying in the bush. "Young lady, why are you crying? And why do you run from your mother's arranged marriage? That was disrespectful," he said. "She's not my mother." Then she looked up and saw it was the prince. "Lost but found. What are you doing here?" she asked. "Lost but found," the prince repeated. "So it was you who helped me years back. What is your real name?" "I am Iluoma. Why do you ask?" "Why didn't you tell me you were the one I have been looking for? You are with my sister, and you said I am dirty." "It's of no point telling you," she replied. The prince apologized to her and took her to the palace. Later in the day, he went to the wedding venue and told them that the lady they are waiting for is with him and is his wife-to-be. He told them to pack their stuff and leave or face the king's punishment. "What are you saying, my prince?" "I am your wife-to-be," Ugoma said. To her surprise, the prince called her by her name and said, "Ugoma, why do you pretend to be your stepsister Iluoma?" "I didn't pretend. I am Iluoma," she said. The prince replied, "If you are Iluoma, then I will marry you instantly if you get the following questions correctly." She agreed. The prince then called everyone's attention and began to ask her, "If you say you are Iluoma, what was that name you used to call me then?" I told you it has been long. I can't remember that." "Okay. After the maths competition, I gave you a gift. What was that?" "A jewelry," she said. The prince smiled. "What was the help you rendered to me back then?" She didn't even know, but she remembered hearing her stepsister telling one of her friends that she saved someone from a careless set trap in the bush. "I helped free you from a trap in the bush the day you mistakenly stepped into a dangerous trap," she said. "Really?" the prince replied. "It seems like he is enjoying her stupidity." He said, "Okay, where was the first place we met and what I was doing?" "I met you on my way to the stream while you were going hunting." She was happy. She remembered he used to hunt as a kid. The prince could no longer bear her claims, so he ordered that she be arrested immediately for impersonation. Some days later, the prince fixed his wedding with Iluoma. On the day of their wedding, just as their tradition demands, the brides-to-be alongside other maidens from same kindred would cover their faces with clothes and allow the groom to make his choice. At this point, whosoever he chooses, he must marry. If he mistakenly chose the wrong bride, he must take her home and marry her. They believed whosoever he chooses must be the god's destined wife for him, and assumes the chosen bride is the rightful wife for him, and they will live happily and peacefully ever after. While the bride they came for must be the wrong one and would bring misfortune to the groom if he had married her. On the day of their wedding, something unimaginable happened. When the prince was called to choose his bride among the blindfolded maidens, he chose one of the maidens. When he uncovered her, it was Iluoma he picked. The world turned into misery for the prince. Words was not enough to describe how badly he felt, seeing that he has been tricked to picking his worst enemy. The most painful part of it was that no one had ever made this costly mistake since time immemorial. Why of all people would the prince make this kind of mistake, picking the wrong bride, and of all people he picked Iluoma? He felt like strangling her to death that minute. To Iluoma, it was like a nightmare. Now that she thought her years of suffering has ended, not knowing she has been daydreaming, she could not bear the shame and disgrace, so she ran away from the venue. Everywhere became cold. It seems the cloud has covered the whole atmosphere, like midnight darkness in the middle of the day.